So how old is a lake trout, or how old do lake trout get? You know, it's kind of not really a mystery, but if you do a quick Google search, like you'll find results anywhere from 70 to 20 to 30 to 40. You know, there's really no defined conclusion on how old like an average lake trout is, or how old, you know, is the oldest lake trout out there, right? There's so much speculation, and I also think it just varies based on location, where you are, you know, whether you're around the Great Lakes or, you know, in Ontario or far up in the Northwest Territories. Like, there's just so much variety in the lakes, in the water temps, in their eating habits, and you know, that's kind of what makes lake trout kind of one of our favorite species, is they just vary so much. Every fish is different. Every fish, you know, they live at such different depths and eat such different food. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what this video is about, is to answer the question, how old is a lake trout? And we're going to answer that by finding the age of a 40-inch fish. I'm just going to give this fish the nickname Fred. We caught Fred about let me back up here. To properly age a trout, it has to be dead. There's no way to age a lake trout and have it be alive still and release that, right? So it has to be dead. There's a little bone inside their head, and it has rings like a tree. It's kind of like in their ear bone. We'll have you know, so some people from the Minnesota DNR here kind of properly explain what it is, but you know, from my knowledge, it's more like an ear bone, and you have to cut that in half and measure the rings of it, right? Kind of like a tree. That's how you properly determine the age of the fish. So 2 weeks ago, we had a guide trip, and it was, you know, around noon, 1 o'clock. Water temps are, you know, super high 40s, 48, 49, 50 degrees out on Lake Superior. We do, you know, the majority of our guiding in Bayfield, Wisconsin, in the Apostle Islands. So we had a you know, a big fish hit. It hit on the port side downrigger. Rigger was set at 45, 50 feet, right? You catch a lake trout out of 50 feet of water, and water temps are in the high 40s, like that fish will release all day long. You know, you catch 1,000 of those fish, 1,000 of those fish should release just fine. You know, warm water temps and deep water are detrimental to catching and releasing lake trout. This was shallow water. This is cold water. It's perfectly fine to catch and release a trout out of those conditions, right? So guy client's reeling it in. It's fighting like heck. You know, we use St. Croix Icon 7'6" trolling rods. You're a little bit underpowered when a fish of this caliber hits, which is fun, right? I like to be a little bit underpowered on our downrigger setups. And you know, fighting hard. It's a big fish. It's fighting. You can just tell by the big head shakes that it's a solid fish, right? And you know, fought it for maybe 5-6 minutes, and then all of a sudden it's just kind of like I see the head shakes subside. It's just kind of, the rod is just kind of doubled over, right? There's really no effort for that fish to swim back to bottom. It's just kind of, you know, weight of sorts. So we get it up. I see it in the prop wash. You know, big fish, right? Grab the net it. Hooked right in the corner of the mouth, so no problem whatsoever, on a, you know, 5-inch spoon, white spoon with a red head and a treble hook, right? Hooked right in the corner of the mouth, no problem. Net the fish, bring it in, and what I always do is I always have my live well full of water, right? Big fish are very special. They're old, they can be fragile. You got to take care of these fish, right? You know, there's no need to kill a big fish. So I like to give them the best care possible. My live well is always full. We net that fish, we get it in. Immediately, I just, you know, put it like right into the live well, right? That's where I can take the hooks out. I can, you know, we can get camera ready. We can keep, you know, water flowing on that fish. And, you know, just to increase its chances of survival and mitigate any extra stress that is induced upon that fish. So, you know, we get it in the well, we have water running on it, and it's like, it goes belly up in the live well, which I didn't really think much of, and, you know, maybe it was just tired from the fight, you know, that again lasted under 10 minutes, but, you know, whatever. Some fish can get tired out, I don't know. You know, so we have cameras ready, we pick it up, one hand around the tail, one under the belly. You never want to put your hands in the fish's gills, right? One hand around the tail, one under the belly. You take a couple photos. I grab the fish, I go to release it. And I'll just spare you, you know, 30 minutes I sat there and tried to release this fish. Never once, from the time that I netted it to the time, you know, 30 minutes later when I gave up, this fish never moved a muscle. It was just kind of stone cold. It just looked dead in the eyes. Like you could just tell by looking at his eyes that there just wasn't anyone home anymore. There was never a drop of blood expelled from this fish. It was just kind of, you know, lights out. And his gills were getting pale despite zero blood. And, you know, I knew something had to happen internally to this fish. Some cardiac event took place during that fight. You know, when we go from seeing that fish's, you know, big head shakes to just a rod that's just doubled over and just kind of pure weight, you know, something happened right there during that fight. Some cardiac event took place where this fish died. It literally died on the fight. So, you know, talked with the guide clients, and I'm like, hey guys, like, you're not going to want to eat this fish. It's obviously you can eat it if you want. You guys can, you know, if you want to mount it, you can mount it. If you want to eat it, or else, you know, my buddy Nick with the Minnesota DNR Fisheries, we'll bring it to him and do some cool research on this fish. And you know, so we ended up donating the fish to the DNR, you know, in kind of in the name of science of sorts, to look into this fish. So that very next day, we took it into the Minnesota DNR Fisheries office at French River, kind of just north of Duluth, Minnesota here. And, you know, Nick and I, we first of all, I just told Nick that I think something happened. So Nick cut the fish open and I told him, like, let's look at the heart, let's look at everything, you know, right? So we cut the fish open. First thing we noticed were 3 huge herring in its stomach, like big herring, right? Like that. So he was digesting 3 of those. That's the first thing we saw. Second thing we saw was that it was a male fish. We could see the testes in there. And then third thing that we noticed was some abnormality on its heart. It wasn't like it looked like a fatty substance, but it was very firm, almost like a rubber of sorts, almost like a Z-Man plastic, right? You could pinch it as hard as you wanted to, but your fingers won't break through. Like, you couldn't break this. It was attached to the heart. It definitely was abnormal, and I'm not exactly sure. Nick took a few pictures, and I think he, you know, consulted some others, and I'm not exactly sure what it ended up being. We'll check in with him when we head to the DNR office right after this. But it was definitely abnormal, and I think, you know, that caused the death, the heart-related issues in this fish. So, you know, and then along with it, we took this Lake Trout Age. We took those ear bones, and which is, you know, the whole premise of this video is how old is a 40-inch trout, and we're gonna go answer that question now. So that's a little bit background on Fred, our lake trout. You know, 40-inch fish. You know, that was a big special fish, right? And how old is it? I don't know. We put a post out on Facebook, and answers all over the map, from 20 to 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. I think someone guessed 80. Like, all over the map, right? And that just kind of tells you, like, no one really knows, right? There's so much. You know, it's just kind of obscure, like, how old is a 40-inch fish. So Lake Superior's a deep, cold, infertile lake. You know, yes, this fish had 3 big herring, you know, but aside from that, Lake Superior is it's mean. It's a desert out there. There's not a ton of food. There's not a ton of anything, really. Like, it's the more you go into the lake, the more it becomes an absolute desert. So she's mean out there. I think this fish has potential to be old, especially since it was a male. If it was a female fish, you know, it could be a little bit younger, but male, I don't know. I'm going to guess, you know, mid to, you know, maybe low 30s, 30, 31. That's going to kind of be my guess. I don't know. But now we're going to head to the DNR office, the fisheries office, and chat with some folks there. And I think we're going to, you know, cut this fish's ear bone open and live age it under a microscope, and we'll have them kind of talk about the process, how they do it. It's really cool. They just got some new technology that allows them to do this right here in Duluth. So yeah, let's head over there and meet up with those guys, and it should be interesting. All right, so here we are at the French River Minnesota DNR Fisheries building, and this is where Nick Peterson, who's kind of a Great Lakes fisheries specialist, is stationed. So we're going to go up into his office and chat with him. He's going to give us a little background information on kind of the process, kind of what we're going to do in regards to aging this fish. So I don't know. I know a 40-inch fish is special. It's old. How old? I don't know. I don't know. But let's go up and chat with Nick quick. And again, they have to cut this ear bone and look at it under a microscope. And as Nick will describe, previously they didn't have this technology and have these microscopes to look at it here at the French River Station. They had to send it out, but now they have all these tools here. So it's really cool that we can do all this in the building here. So let's go up to Nick's office quick. All right, buddy, here we go.
Yo.
How you doing? This is Nick Peterson with the Minnesota DNR,
up,
a fisheries specialist here in Duluth, Minnesota. So I'm excited for today and what to find out the age of this. So kind of talk us through about the process or what we have to do to properly determine the age of a fish.
Yeah, so there's quite a process to everything. A lot of people want that age right away, right? And it's not the case. We got to go through a bunch of steps in order to get a correct age on a fish. So in general, what we start with is extracting the otolith.
Yep. Which is what we did about 2 weeks ago. So like the day after I caught this fish, we brought it in here and we cut that fish open, and that's when we found those big big herring in there, and we found that heart abnormality, and then Nick took out the otolith, it's called, and that's essentially the fish's ear bone.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. It's calcified structure that's inside of the head, and in order to get that out, the fish has to be dead. And so that's just one way that we can age a fish, and it's the non-lethal, or it's a lethal.
Correct.
Method.
Correct.
To age the fish.
Correct. So. But it's the only way to do it, and it's 100% accurate. Like it's proper, right?
Not 100% accurate,
but pretty dang close.
But as close as you can get.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the thing about this lake trout. They're just so, I don't know, they're so diverse, especially with Lake Superior. And I mean, you're involved with a lot of the predator-prey diet studies on fish out there. I mean, it's, near shore and certain times of the year, there's an abundance of food out there. But other times, like it's a desert out there, right? There's not a ton going on in Lake Superior as contrasted to Lake Michigan and their alewives and other bodies of water. Like it's remote out there. So like there's potential for fish to get very old, right? I mean, what's the oldest lake trout you guys have ever aged?
The oldest lake trout is one that you had provided to us.
Is it that one? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And that was a number of years ago, and I believe that was a 46-year-old lake trout.
46. So. Yep. So on a guide trip, I remember this. It was about 4 years ago. We were trolling near shore, like early season, kind of for browns and salmon near shore using smaller spoons, and we had a outside board went off, 2 colors of lead, and it was a 44.5-inch fish. It just inhaled the spoon. The spoon never hooked the fish. His mouth, the hook just looped around one of its gills, and the fish essentially bled out by the time it got to the boat, right? So, I mean, that's just a lesson in all of this is yes, I have more passion for releasing big lake trout than anybody out there, but at the same time, it happens, right? Crap happens that you can't avoid. Like I can't avoid my spoon looping around its gill. I can't avoid like this fish here that we're going to age today, right? It literally had a cardiac event, right? You can't. There's some stuff you just can't do, right? But there's things that you can do. You can, when you get that fish to the boat, keep it in the water. Keep your hands out of its gills. One hand around the tail, one under the belly. Keep flowing water on it in your live well if you want to get ready for a picture, right? Keep it in your net, in the water. Just, really do whatever you can. These fish get old. So 46 is the oldest fish that you guys have seen. I mean, that's crazy. That's old.
And the catch and release mortality, or what we consider in like the fisheries world is fishing mortality, harvest mortality, and then the stuff happens mortality.
Right.
That's part of the fishing
For
mortality.
For sure.
That goes into the whole reason why we age these fish. So that's a piece of the puzzle, is that fishing mortality, hooking mortality that occurs. If we can accurately age these fish, we can use that information and plug it into models that can estimate that fishing mortality, natural mortality, and give us a baseline on how to not over harvest this fishery.
Right.
And so it gives us a total allowable catch and quota, but we need accurate ages, and like what we're going to do today to make that happen.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Everyone kind of, I think the tides are turning over the years, like especially 10 years ago, like people saw Lake Superior and kind of acted like it was a Lake Michigan, right? It was like your salmon, right? Your salmon live to be 4 or 5 years old. They're huge. You kill everyone you catch, and the fishery's fine. It's sustainable, right? We don't have many salmon out here. These are lake trout, right? Everyone's filling their coolers with big lake trout, like you're going to have an impact on that fishery, right? I mean, there's so much water out there. There's so much water, but it's my personal opinion that, I'll be the first to say, I guarantee you 95% of those fish are in, 0.05% of the area out there. There's so much dead water out there where there's not fish. And, I mean, it's truly a desert is how I best describe it.
It's so much water, it's so much void to fill with the amount of volume out there.
I know, but
it's crazy to think
but
about.
I think it is, I'm convinced that it is kind of it still can be a fragile fishery with how cold the water temps are out there and how, slow that, a lot of these fish do grow. So yeah, no, that's kind of cool. But, looking at your spreadsheet there, a lot of fish in that, 20 to 30 age, year range. And so
It definitely, there's a lot of variability. So a lot of the, you bring us a 40-inch lake trout and, I've been following you on social media and stuff like that. And we've worked together on a few things, with the Predator Prey Project and other things. But just having people guess on the age of this fish is just kind of cool.
It was really cool. And that's what I mentioned earlier in the intro to this. Like, they were anywhere. Like, there was people guessing 20, 30, all the way up to 80, 90, right?
Yeah, right.
And that just tells you that, you don't really know. Right. I mean, you look at a big whitetail and people, everyone knows that it's probably 4.5, 5.5, 6.5-year-old deer. But with fish, it's totally, I mean, there's age ranges 80 years apart.
And just because it's a 40-inch lake trout, that's what a lot of people, with the different morphotypes of lake trout that we have out here, leans, Siskowitz, humpers, redfin, that all have this different life history and how they grow and what they do in life.
For sure.
You can have a humper, humper lake trout that is 20 inches long, that is 30 years old.
100%.
Or you can have a 40-inch lake trout that is, 40 inches and massive and 36 inches.
Right, which is why is a reason that I don't think this fish is that old, because, it lives in herring waters, and herring are such a fatty fish. I mean, it's a fish that I think contributes to immense growth. But does growth equal length, or does growth equal width, or does it equal both? I don't know. You might know more about that than I would. But this fish had girth too, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, there's fish that
And it was a male too.
It was a male, right? Yeah. I mean, males are definitely smaller than females in the fish world. So
yeah.
I don't know. It'll be interesting. So we need to head downstairs. We can see us cutting this. I mean, how does you do it all through?
Yeah, the whole process. What we'll start with is we'll go visit Nate. Nate's down there cutting otoliths right now.
Okay.
And so what he does is takes each otolith and puts it into epoxy.
Okay.
And gets it placed in epoxy. And once that dries, we'll mount it into a cutting wheel.
Yep.
And we'll real thin section that otolith right down the middle.
Okay.
And it'll give us a thin section that then we can lay it flat on a microscope and look at the rings within that and count the rings to see how old it is.
And this microscope is kind of new technology for you guys, right?
It is for us, yeah. There's been others, that have been using this for a while. We just got upgraded now to this better system.
Yeah.
Better or worse, it should be more efficient.
Well, it's nice you can do it all here, right? You can do it all
here. And we can pull this up on digital on a screen. And
oh, really? Cool.
Instead of having to look through the microscope and try to take a picture with your phone like we used to do, we can just bring it up on a computer screen and look at the otolith right there and, kind of
Where did those papers go? Do you have those pictures from earlier?
Yeah, they're right here, actually. Yeah, so something similar to what we'll be looking at today is... there's a good one right there. Here's just one example of. Let's see if we can find
We can get a close-up shot of this after.
Yeah.
So kind of here's what we're looking at is the otolith, and we can see the rings in here. It's almost like rings of a tree of sorts.
Yep.
And each one signifies a year, right?
Yep. Yeah. So basically, why these rings get laid down, it's like the concept of a tree. Like you're taught when you're little, you cut the tree open and count the rings, and that's how old it is. So what happens is in the wintertime, with that water temp being as cold as it is, the fish slows in its growth. So you've got this period throughout the summer and whatever where food is more abundant, the water temperature is warmer, the fish is growing faster. Then you get into the wintertime and it slows down and it just stacks up these rings
so
every day.
Essentially, this tells you when winter is, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So this is basically we call it a winter check.
Yeah.
So it'll tell you when winter occurred, and then obviously
cool.
that's a new year after winter occurred.
Yeah.
So
very cool, man. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that's what we're looking at. So yeah, let's head downstairs and see what we find out. I'm excited.
Let's do it. So yeah, now we're downstairs at the otolith cutting station, and we're here with Nate Beckman, who's the assistant area fishery supervisor for Lake Superior, who kind of is in charge of all this stuff, right?
Yep.
So you're gonna show them the whole process of what
Absolutely.
we do with the otolith once I give it to Nate.
Sounds good. So Nick tosses me an envelope with a couple otoliths in it. I take those out and I mount them into an epoxy mold here. I fill them half full with epoxy first, put in the otolith, and then cover them up. Let those dry for 24 hours. And they just pop out like a little Pez. Here's one.
Yeah. Just like a little.
I make sure I orient them the right way so they're the easiest to cut and we don't get any air bubbles in there. Then we take that little guy and we throw him in the chuck here. This is a low-speed saw usually used for cutting stone or making jewelry. So I'll toss it in the chuck there, torque it down, and then you just got to line up the otolith in such a way that we get right through the middle of it to capture all the rings. I want it perpendicular to the saw blade. Then I will mess with this little dial here, and this lets me super precisely maneuver where I'm going to cut. Right there is dead center on the otolith. So I set it up, start the saw, gently set it on that blade, and let it work its way through. I have it set up to automatically turn the saw off once it's done cutting through. So you'll hear a click and a red light, and it'll stop. Now we grab the little wafer right there. It's still attached to the other end of our little pellet. I'll just gently take that off. Get some of the fluid off of it, the lubrication fluid. And that right there is our final product. A nice little cross section. So I'll take that and I will mount it on a microscope slide with a little bit of super glue. And then we'll take it over to the scope and count the rings. That's about all there is to it. And we do that all day. So we'll take these over to the scope. We'll get an idea of how old it is and go from there.
Yeah, so as we were out in the lab, Nate was cutting, sectioning these otoliths. Now we're going to bring it into the inside lab to bring it up on the monitor and try to age this thing, right?
Absolutely.
So Nate's going to get it centered for us, and then hopefully we can get it put up on the screen right here where we can all kind of look at it in the same light. Get a picture of it up for us to age.
All right. So this is the fish in question. I've glued it down and I've applied some mineral oil to help us get a clearer picture here. Here we go.
And not to be a spoiler, but it looks like there's quite a few.
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah.
So where do we start? You start from.
So we call this the black hole here. The nucleus
Okay.
is a tough area to work with because especially on older fish, that bone it's been there so long, it's a lot more degraded than the newer layers that have been laid down.
Okay.
So what I try to do is I try to find kind of the first obvious line in here to work with, and that's where we're going to start. So I can see one right here.
Right here.
Why don't we start right on that?
So that'll be
one.
Now I notice up here these lines are very spread out. Down here these lines are very close together. Can you presume that this may be the fish's birth and this is the fish's death down here?
Absolutely. So they lay down a ring on the outside of the otolith as it grows, just
Okay.
like tree rings.
Okay.
So this would be, when the fish was born, and this would be this last season when it was alive.
So is it safe to draw the conclusion that fish, a lake trout, or this lake trout, I guess, grows quickly, more quickly earlier in its life versus late in its life?
Absolutely.
Which
Yep.
is, okay. It's interesting to know it too, just because like early in its life, right, it's eating a lot smaller bait. Later in its life, it's eating huge herring, right?
Yeah.
Its growth is so slow later in its life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's reached a size where it can get the nutrients it needs, and,
Right.
and more size may actually be a detriment at a certain.
100%. Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, yeah.
So let's start counting here. So that's one,
One.
and then we will go 2,
Yep.
3, 4, There's interesting. We'll call it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and then there's 30. I think this last line, when was this fish caught?
2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll count the last string then, which would put us at 31.
31 years old.
Yep.
31 years old.
And
Wow.
so some of these
You can
rings in
kinda-
here,
Yeah.
they're difficult. We'd have to look at it some more. So this was just kind of the first pass through.
Yep.
So here we have the other otolith. We always take both of them. Sometimes we compare them. Sometimes we're good with our first one. On this one, we want to take another look just because it's such an old fish. It's nice to have, another count, another avenue to count here. So if we count up here, let's start right in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, and the edge makes 34.
34. So anywhere from what, 31 to 34. Is
That's
kinda-
where I would put it. My confidence is pretty high within that interval.
Yeah.
It could be a little bit older. It could be a little bit younger. Some of these could be false annuli.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we can feel pretty confident this fish is over 30 years
That's
old.
so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nice that kind of, so every fish has 2 otoliths, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you can get kind of 2 samples. So that's
Yep.
what we did. Our first one was what, 31, 32, and then this one,
Yep.
we see 34. So
Yep. And these are, so they actually have other bones up in there we could take, but they're a lot smaller. We take these otoliths in particular because they're the largest, which makes
Okay.
them the easiest to work with.
Okay.
Other species of fish, some people use the other ones, but with
Yep.
lake trout, we just use this particular bone out of their inner ear.
Awesome, man. What an old fish. That's so cool.
Absolute pig.
So cool. Pretty crazy. I'm 33, so it's, I mean, it's born, that fish is born in 1991, 1992. Which
Yeah.
is just wild to think about, right?
It's absolutely crazy.
I mean, a fish that's just as old as I am, and it's what that fish has experienced out there in the lake. Just the storms it's been through,
The
what
years
it's
it's
seen,
seen,
right? Like,
exactly.
man, that's so cool.
On the miles it's covered. You
Right?
just never know
Yeah.
how much a fish like this has just been all over the lake, or maybe it's a
Right.
resident fish that likes to hang out in a particular spot.
For sure. Yeah, no, each fish tells a story, and no, that's really cool to get a pretty decent estimate on the age of that. And again, we can just use that to continue to educate about the fragility of the fishery and how
Absolutely.
slow lake trout grow and how special they are and how just try to promote catch and release overall too. I mean, a big fish like this is not good to eat, right? Just think of all the mercury, the fat in its meat.
The
like, it's-
bioaccumulation in a fish like this is way up there.
right? There's no need to eat a fish like
Absolutely.
this. And, yes, stuff happens, right? You catch a big fish, they do die, right?
Yep, foul
So,
hook, you never
For
know.
sure, stuff happens, but big fish like this, again, as we can see right here with the science, they're old, they're special, right? Like
They absolutely are.
they're cool, man. That's awesome. That's pretty incredible. Wow.
So as Grant alluded to earlier, this we came to a consensus of what, 34?
34.
34 on this lake trout. Grant had mentioned before, this fish had some sort of cardiac event, and I had actually contacted our DNR pathologist and just asked him, are heart attacks common in fish to be having during and while they're fighting a fish, bringing it up? And he said there was one potential virus that could have been the cause of the heart condition, and I've got a picture of the heart condition here that Grant will probably show you. But and what was referred to me as ISA virus, or infectious salmon anemia virus. So For more information on that, we would have to consult with our pathologist in St. Paul, who is a wizard at that kind of stuff. But most likely the case is it was not that virus. It was just, you know, a big old lake trout getting caught by Grant, and he's like, oh, it's my time. Yep.
This is the end of the road.
Might as well go. If I'm going to go, I'm going to go with Grant, right? We'll go big.
Go with Grant.
Yeah. So as Grant says, thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next week on Spear Angling.